Hi, and welcome to another show from Pace TV, the Pace of San Diego. I'm your host, Angel Alvarez. On today's show, we'll be talking about a group of people who have lived in the San Diego area for over 7,000 years. Some say it might be closer to 10,000 years or more. I know whenever I have moved somewhere new, I have wondered about the people who lived there before me. I have wondered what the area looked like, what changes they might have made to the house, or what did their garden look like. Here in what we know as San Diego North County, it was and is a people known as the Kumeyay. They would have lived between Oceanside to the north and Ensenada to the south, and from the coast to the desert, and would have moved as the seasons and the availability of some foods were ready for harvest. The city of Poway has established a cultural center where you can see some of the artifacts that have been gathered to give you a glimpse into the world of the Kumeyay and how they lived. Today, we'll be talking to Heidi Marc-Aurele, who is one of the volunteer docents at the center, who has spent many years at the center and who has studied this culture and will tell us about the center and the Kumeyay as a people. Welcome, Heidi, and let's get started.
Thank you.
Where is the center and when was it established?
It was established in 1987. It's right off of Poway Road. The actual road that it's on is Ipai Waypuk Trail, which means First Peoples Trail. So it's south of Poway Road.
And what was the purpose for opening the center? I mean, who decided that maybe it would be a good idea? Or?
Yeah, it was the city of Poway under the persuasion of Bob and Suzanne Emery. They wanted the site preserved and also used for educational purposes.
Now, was this something that they owned, or I mean, how did they pick this particular spot?
It was had not been built on. I think there was an adobe house there in the 30s and 40s, but it wasn't owned by anybody at that time. Well, it was, but it wasn't lived on.
Okay.
And so they put forth the proposal for the city of Poway to acquire the 5-acre site.
And what kind of things are there that would interest people to see?
Well, it interests people for history. If people know that the history of the site is there, that's usually what they're interested in. The school kids come because they want to study the first people of their community. People who are botanists and plant people like to come and visit because the site is almost entirely native plants. We have a few non-native plants, but almost entirely native plants.
Okay, what kind of programs and activities are there at the center? I mean, you're only opened one weekend or one Saturday a month? Is that true?
That's correct. We're open the third Saturday of every month from 10 until 1 for people of the community to come and visit us. During the school year, we're open for third grade tours on Thursdays and Fridays. We have activities. We try to do a couple of activities a year. We've just did a recent craft program for kids to make some Native American type instruments. We've done painting sessions. People spread out in the, among the rocks and the trees and set up an easel and paint.
Oh, wow.
We've done basket weaving classes. We've done flint knapping classes. So we try to tie in activities that go with the theme of the place.
Now, one of the things that we talked about when you and I originally talked, one of the things that is interesting in North County and different than many of the other reservations is that the reservations that we see here in North County, because we have the Sequan, we have Barona, we have Paula, we have Pachanga, we have, gosh, I can't even think of all of them right now. There's some 12 or 13 different reservations in North County. Is that true?
Well, I can speak to all of San Diego County. There are 18 reservations in San Diego County. 13 are Kumeyay.
Okay.
The other 5 are Cahuilla, Cupeno, and Luiseño.
And Luiseños. Okay. But what I was going to get to by the point I was trying to make so clumsily was that although there's different reservations, it's the 13 of the 18 are Kumeyay.
That's right.
They're not like Apaches and Navajos and Cherokees and a bunch of other different First Nation groups. They are all Kumeyay.
That's right.
And how did they get to have 13? Why did they just make one big one like the Apaches or the Navajos or any of those people have?
You know, I haven't studied that whole treaty process very closely. All I know, my understanding is that it was done differently here in San Diego County, and each of the different bands got reservation land. And so that's why there are 13 of them. And of those 13, 8 of them are gaming nations. So those are the ones that people are more familiar with, like Barona and Siquan and Viejas. The ones that have gambling are called gambling nations, and of that 13, 8 of them are gambling nations, but they're all Kumeyay.
Even though we see different reservations
Mm-hmm.
for the different, so how did they come up with a reservation for each of those? Because the bands are a patriarchal grouping, right? I mean, is that how they got to be that way? Or how would we define a band as opposed to a tribe?
It's a clan.
Okay,
That's the best way that I can describe it. It's like a clan.
okay.
And so the different clans got reservation land, but not always where they were. For example,
really?
the Kumeyay that were at our village site were sent to San Pasqual. So that's, you know, a fair distance from the area where they were.
Right.
So, you know, the American government changed things around, moved them from their traditional village areas.
Are the Kumeyay or any of the Kumeyay now currently involved with the center, and were they involved before? How did the center evolve, and how did they work with the Kumeyay to set this up, or did they even include the Kumeyay or ask the Kumeyay what they should have?
We did. We had quite a bit of guidance from an elder at San Pasqual named Dorothy Tavui. She's passed on now, but she gave us a lot of time and mentorship as we were developing our program for the visitors and everything. San Pasqual is a little bit involved with us, but not much. They're really busy with what they're doing on their land. I think they're trying to get a cultural center and a museum going, so they're more involved with what they're doing.
So they'll have their own cultural center on their tribal land.
Right.
Okay.
But when the center was first opened, quite a few of the gaming nations gave some money and some help. We have a flag that has Barona and Siquan, Viejas. I think there's a fourth one, but they have been involved with us, not as much now.
Okay. Okay. But they were in the beginning, and Dorothy was a big help in
Very big
in
help.
getting everything
Yeah,
started.
yeah.
Okay. Is the language still spoken? Do the Kumeyay have their own language, and if so, is it still spoken by members of the nation? I guess the Kumeyay nation.
They're in the process of reviving it and trying to make it a living language again. There are some dialect differences among the different areas of the clans, and so there is a very thick dictionary that was put out, and sometimes for one word you might see 4 different Kumeyay words for it, depending on which clan used which word. But it is in the process of being revived and spoken more.
Okay, so would the Kumeyay speak Kumeyay amongst themselves? And I would imagine within a clan they might, or is it English still pretty much the language?
I think it's predominantly English. We do have, in the summer, sometimes we'll have a summer group from Barona come out, and the instructors that come with the kids use a lot of Kumeyay with them. So in the preschool and the elementary school out at Barona, for example, they're trying to use the language more with the children.
With the children from Barona, from the Barona clan or the Barona band. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is they're still trying to do something with it,
Yes.
and not just let it die like
Right.
so much.
It had gotten dangerously close to being dead, you know, with
I
only
would
a few
imagine.
native speakers.
I would
But
imagine, yeah.
yeah.
There's so many of the First Nation languages that have just died because there's nobody to speak them anymore. Okay, did the early Kumeyay stay in one place year round, or we said they lived from Oceanside to Ensenada, from the coast, from the desert to the coast? How did they migrate during the year, or did they migrate during the year?
They did move seasonally, depending on what plants were available to harvest and where those plants were. They followed, you know, the plants and the game and everything, you know, animals. So they did move seasonally from, you know, a summer village to a winter village. They didn't start to occupy a village site year-round until after the Mexican period, or during the Mexican
So
period.
that would have been the middle of the 1800s.
Yeah, 1821 to
yeah,
1848, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then that whole existence of property, and this is ours, and we've got boundaries up, and you can't cross. So then the Kumeyay really couldn't migrate seasonally like they were used to. They had to stay in one
Okay,
place.
now is this because what the Kumeyaay did or what the Mexican government?
Mexican did.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay. So the
yeah.
Mexican government put up the fences, and then the Kumeyaay
Yeah.
couldn't just go
Yeah,
back and
they had
forth
the
like
big
that.
ranchos, and you couldn't
Okay,
cross.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I wondered about that. Now, when we talked before, you talked about the black oak. I
Oh,
believe?
yes.
Okay, so the black oak produces a
Big acorn.
big acorn, not the little acorns that we see off the live oaks, but
Right.
but a big one. And where would they find that?
That one's up in the Kumeyaay Mountains.
Oh, okay.
And you can only harvest the acorns in the fall. That's the only time they're ready to be harvested. And so there was a big migration up to the Kumeyaay Mountains from the people in the desert, from the inland people, from the coastal people. So it was a big gathering place.
Okay, so they would go there to gather the black oak, and then would they use those then during the entire year? I mean, until I mean, do the acorns go bad? I mean, we think of things spoiling after a while, and you can't keep
well,
eating it forever.
if the bugs get into them, they
Oh,
can go
okay.
bad. But you have to have enough acorns for the whole year, and maybe even more than 1 year in case there's a poor harvest the next year. So they had huge granary baskets made out of willow bark that they would store the acorns in. We've seen old photographs from the 1800s. These baskets are like 6 feet tall.
Oh, my gosh.
And there'd be several of them in a village site.
So it'd be like what we think of as a silo.
A silo, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
but they were a willow basket silo
Right.
full of black oak or acorns. Wow.
And the other acorns,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, what kind of tools would they have had? What kind of tools and what would they have used them for?
Well, they had mostly stone tools, but not all the tools were stone, but a lot of them were made out of stones. You have knife points, you have scrapers, you have arrow shaft straighteners that are out of stone. But we tell the kids when they come to visit us, if they needed a tool, they had to make it.
Okay. Now, arrow shaft straighteners. Now
Yes.
that sounds interesting. What would an arrow? I can imagine an arrow shaft, and I can imagine if you just broke off a twig off of a tree, that it could have a bend in it. So the arrow shaft straightener was to make that shaft straight.
Straight, yes.
Now, did they do that by like wetting it and then bending it, or did they use it like a plane to scrape off part, or both?
We have actually an ancient artifact in the site that's very ancient, arrow shaft straightener. It's about that big, and it has a groove in it. Okay. So they would wet the arrow shaft, and they would put the shaft straightener, the stone, into the fire and get it really hot. And then the arrow shaft is run through that groove over and over again until it becomes as straight as can be.
So it'd be almost like steaming it then, because the arrow shaft would be soaked with water, and then the straightener is hot.
The rock is hot, yeah.
Okay, and then wow, interesting. I guess, just like you said, if you had to do it, you had to figure out how to do it by yourself. 'Cause
Exactly.
You couldn't run down to Home Depot and get an arrow shaft straightener, right?
No.
What about shelter? I understand we always think of the Plains Indians with teepees and moving your teepee and taking your tent poles with you, but the Kumeyay didn't have teepees.
No. They had a dome-shaped house, and the Kumeyay word for house is iwa, or awa, and that's what they lived in during the winter usually, more protection from the elements during the winter. My understanding of the summer village sites, they just slept under the trees, out in the open.
Oh, okay.
But they did have awas for the winter villages. They're made out of plants, again, a flexible piece, a branch is your framework, and then all around would be tule reeds or baccharis plants. So if you can think of like a thatched roof, it would be sort of that process. And that's what they had for houses during the winter.
Okay, now we talked about before the Mexican period, when the idea, because for the First Nation people, they didn't understand owning land.
Right.
You couldn't own land; it's Mother Earth. You can't own Mother Earth.
It's for everybody,
right?
yeah.
You know. So, but before that, did did the people that lived in the desert move to the coast, and coast people moved to the desert, and people from up north moved down to Ensenada and places like that as the seasons went? Or?
They moved as the seasons went, but sort of in their territory. I don't think somebody from near Oceanside, for example, would have gone down into Ensenada, but they could have. I mean, it was all their territory, but I think they sort of had their range that they would migrate in.
For lack of a better, they would stay in their own area. They wouldn't go from the desert to the coast, or from the coast to...
They would, but
okay.
maybe not within the range of the entire Kumeyay territory, maybe just within the range of their geographic area.
Okay, so they might move 15 miles inland, but not 60 miles inland, or north to south the same kind of way.
Right.
Okay, so what would be the reason for moving, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
I think it's the resources, where the plants are, what food source is ready to be harvested that they
so
needed.
they would still move within their area depending on what was available to them in their area. So they might move from north to south, but that might be 4 or 5 miles, not 50 miles or 60 miles. Okay.
Yeah.
Were there ever instances where the entire Kumeyay nation, as I think of it, would get together to have ceremonies or anything that they would get together?
The closest that I can think of is what happened in the Cuyamaca Mountains in the fall with the black oak acorn, because that was also a good place to meet your spouse, you know, so that you're marrying from another group.
Okay.
Still Kumeyay, but another group.
What kind of ceremonies might they have had then? I mean, like, I think of things like the ghost dance and the buffalo dance and the eagle dance and things from other, particularly Plains Indian First Nation people, the dances that they had. Would the Kumeyay have had things like that?
They would, and I really don't know the names of the different kinds of dances they did. I do know that they always had bird singers at their ceremonies. And the bird singers are the people who have been told all of the stories of the Kumeyay, the creation story and all of the songs of their stories. They were told them by the birds, and that's why they're called the bird singers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and some of their creation songs can go for days. It's a long, long song.
Those people would have learned those stories and those songs from the time they were children, or were they selected and
I think they were selected.
You're going to be a
You're
bird
going to
singer?
be a bird singer,
Okay. And then they would be trained as bird singers from
a young
infancy,
age.
whatever, or at least an early age, so they would then be told those songs repeatedly and learn the songs and memorize them, because there was no... What about writing? Was there ever a written Kumeyaay language? Has it ever been written down? I mean, I know there's been studies and things done lately, but...
Yeah, it's been written down now, probably starting with the ethnographers that started to get all the oral histories in the 1800s, and then would develop the alphabet. Well, I mean, the alphabet we use, but the spelling of the words. But I don't think it was written down until about the 1800s.
So we're talking only in the last
Recently,
200 years.
yeah.
So we're talking 7, 8, 10,000 years.
Even
so
longer,
it's a lot of history. Yeah, to just try and...
Always an oral history, yeah.
That's amazing. And you said they have multiple creation stories, so they don't just have one...
Well, you know, the only one that I'm kind of familiar with is the creation story that everything was brought up from the underworld on the back of a turtle to this level of the world. And one of the Poway elementary schools is called Turtleback because of that creation story. But that's the only one that I have a little bit of familiarity with.
Okay. We don't know then why, well, I guess I was trying to figure out how or why there would have been different creation stories. Would have been because the clans or the bands had their own? I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know why there would have been multiple.
I don't know.
You don't
yeah,
know why.
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
you've done a lot of studying, so if you don't know
done
why,
some.
I'm sure we'd have to really look into it. How long have you been a docent at the center?
I've been a docent for over 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what brought you to become a docent? I mean, how do you decide to be a docent at the Kumeyay Interpretive Center?
Well, I was a children's librarian, and so I would often get the kids coming in to do a report on the Kumeyay, and there is so little information that's been printed in books about the Kumeyay. So I was doing some looking online to see what else can I find, and I came across the website for the Kumeyaay Interpretive Center. And I went out on a Saturday to visit. The history caught me. I thought, we don't have history in this country. We're a new country, but man, it's ancient history, and it just intrigued me. I think I stayed 3 hours the whole time it was open. And then I decided to become a docent.
Our history in this country is so short. I mean, we've only been a country for 250 years.
Yeah.
And you think about other civilizations that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, and ours is like a little
blip.
a little blip somewhere in the midst of all that. What is one of your favorite things about the center? What do you, if I was to say, tell me the best thing at the Kumeyay?
I don't know. I think the best thing is just knowing the deep, deep history there. I'm always thrilled when I'm up at the top of the hill and I'm standing near those very deep grinding holes, just to think about how long they have been on this land. History is what grabs me. That's the thing that really motivates me.
Well, you're talking about the grinding, and of course that's one of the things that you see at the center, because they have actually a lot of them are huge boulders that have been used, that they have just been ground at so long that now there's a hole, a deeper hole. Some of them will go way down. And I was trying to remember when we were talking about that with the people from Blue Sky, there was something about the very deep holes were used for something. I don't remember what that was for. How they got. Oh, I know it. Annie was talking about wood rats. That they would do something with the wood rats in these very deep holes. I was like, okay, don't call me for dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, rabbits or wood rats. Put them in that hole and get your big stout branch and crunch them up.
Okay. Now, what about songs? We talked about ceremonies, and what about songs? Do they sing their stories, or do they just recite the stories? Because
it sounds like a chant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
A very long chant, but they keep the rhythm with the rattle, and then and they just chant it.
So it is a bird song. I mean, it's a bird song.
Yeah.
Okay. So they are keeping the rhythm. So the bird singer just keeps his story going to.
It's usually a group of bird singers, like 4 or 6 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And sometimes when you see the bird singers perform, you'll see a little boys with them that they're training, and they're just shaking the rattle. They don't know all the words yet, but they're there with the men.
Okay.
Singing.
And they're hearing the song repeated, and the idea is that they will then, at some point, then become a bird singer. How many docents are there, and is it something you need more of? Volunteers?
We definitely need more. We have, I think 8 or 9 that do the tours. We have a couple of docents that we call dirt diggers. They help us maintain the trails and keep the plants cut back and everything. We definitely need more. If we had more docents, we could offer more school tours. During the week, we could also probably be open on another 1 or 2 Saturdays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not because you don't want to, it's because you don't always have people that are.
In fact, when I started 15 years ago, we did the school tours Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we were open every Saturday. But we've lost docents from age or moving away, and so now we do 1 Saturday and 2 days a week during the school year.
So it is not an archaeological site. It's just what was there that you're maintaining, like the huge, like I said, the huge boulders with the grinding, with the grinding holes in them, and then you have a couple of the dwellings that I believe you told me were built by a Eagle Scout project.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. But those are in need of repair.
Definitely in need of repair.
Or rebuilding.
The Kumeyay themselves would repair or rebuild their awaz every single year because it's a plant-based house, and plants disintegrate.
What would the Kumeyay have worn as clothing? When we think about that, I mean, we think of breechcloths and a blanket or that sort of thing. So
The women tended to have more clothes on, usually a skirt of yucca or pounded willow bark, sometimes a hide. I think the men just tended to wear a twine belt around their waist. That's where they could attach their rabbit stick or, something like that. But the women tended to have a skirt on at least.
Okay.
But they're sitting on the rocks that are either hot in the summer or cold in the winter. They're going to want clothing.
Something to cover the back of their legs at least, right?
Yeah.
They had a stick that to me was like a Australian boomerang. Really, doesn't look exactly like it, but that's what it reminded me of. And you said that they would throw the stick like low to the ground, not necessarily to kill the rabbit, but at least knock it off its feet.
Yeah, stun it or something.
Oh, it's stunned it. Okay, so then they could go up and then
finish the kill.
Finish the kill, and then that's what they would have
but
for
it's
dinner. So.
The rabbit stick. You mentioned a boomerang, which has equal sides.
Right.
The rabbit stick has a short side and a long side, which makes it wibble and wobble as it skims across the ground.
Okay.
And a rabbit doesn't run in a straight line. They're all over the place. So it's kind of a really well-suited hunting tool.
Okay, so he would
It mimics
wobble like the rabbit
the
was
rabbit.
wibbling wobbling, trying to get away.
Right.
And then they would stun the rabbit, because I'm sure when it hit it with quite a bit of force. They'd thrown it hard.
Yeah.
What about arrows and any kind of like spears or anything like that? Where they've had
They did.
bow and arrows.
They had bow and arrows. They had spears.
Okay.
They had darts for smaller animals. But definitely, there was big game here in the county 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. There were mammoths here. So they had to be able to throw a spear from a safe distance away and still get their spear at into the mammoth. So they had an atlatl. Have you ever heard of that? It's a sort of like a launching device for a spear.
Okay.
And the modern day atlatl is the tennis ball launcher for dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a modern day atlatl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show and has given you some information about the people who have lived in this area for a very long time. I would certainly like to thank my guest, Heidi Marc-Aurele, for her knowledge of the Kumeyay and their way of life here in San Diego County. I hope we've encouraged you to check out the Cultural Center in Poway to find out more about the Kumeyay. Please come back again to see us here at Pace TV, the Pace of San Diego.